found confidence in dwelling in the house of the Lord all the days of his life, gazing upon the beauty or upon the goodness of the Lord, inquiring in his temple. We recognize those elements are kind of needed for us if we're really going to have our confidence in God. We need to be able to pursue that. Verse 5 goes on to say just what we were singing, and it's interesting. For he will hide me in his shelter in the day of trouble. He will conceal me under the cover of his tent. He will lift me high upon a rock. And now my head shall be lifted up above my enemies all around me, and I will offer in his tent sacrifices with shouts of joy. I will sing and make melody to the Lord. And it's obvious that David, when he thinks about the dwelling of God, and he sees it in different ways, much like you were just describing. Some of us see it, as he said, in more like a shelter in time of trouble. When I think of shelter, I think of like an easy up. Right? Someplace you can get underneath, whether it's going to rain or it's too hot outside. Can you relate? Any of that kind of thing. What comes to mind in that sense is even like a gazebo kind of thing, a shelter. Did you see The Sound of Music? And you are 60, and that whole dance around inside the gazebo, and then the two, Maria and the whatever's the captain, thank you, and they're singing, I must have done something good. Right? But they find shelter under that little gazebo. It's something that I love about God, is that any place can be that, really. If you take a moment just to remember God is here, is with you, that place can become a very quiet and calming kind of shelter. But then he goes on to say, he concealed me under the cover of his tent. And that word tent really is almost invites you in as somebody would, a host would invite somebody inside to offer them protection, to offer them a sense of safety. It's like, if you're going to get to him, you got to come through me, kind of a thing, which I've never said to anybody, but you kind of understand the idea that if you even take a moment to think that God is the one who stands in front of you and covers you, right? He hides you into those covers. Used to play games with the boys, and they would, when they're going to bed at night, and you put the cover over their head, and then you lift it off again. I love that sense, and I love the sense sometimes when kids get scared, they try to grab a hold of you and almost hide inside of you. Ever seen a kid grab your leg and just won't let go? Or you come to somebody and say, hi, and they immediately go behind their parent. And I'm a scary person, I understand. Thank you, Randy. I didn't ask for an amen, but that's okay. But you get the idea. It's just it's that sense of hiding and the safety that a parent, that a father can give to you. And then he moves from probably that really intimate thing to that sense of being lifted up as high upon a rock. When you think of somebody lifting you up, or even a child, if they're hiding and you pick them up, they see the world differently when they're sitting in your arms than they did when they're down here on the ground, right? And we have to do the same thing. We have to recognize that when we're down here on the ground in life, it's God that oftentimes can lift us up to see a different perspective, right? If you've ever been up to Yosemite and went up to Glacier Point, or just go up to the top of some hill anywhere, and look down, the world looks different, doesn't it? Everything just kind of seems a different perspective, maybe smaller, maybe a little less a sense of fear. And that's really what God's trying to do for you, and give you that sense of David being lifted up upon this rock, right? And when that happens, when you see that the perspective of life can change when you're up above things, that's when not only is your head lifted up, but so is your spirit. And I think that David was so good to understand even the intricacies of God being a shelter, God being a covering, and at the same time, God being someone who lifts you up and allows you to see that whole thing. And depending on the severity of your challenge, it's just always good to remember that God is there to do those things for you. Sometimes you need to see it differently. But knowing that David's seeing all of this, thinking about the temple of God, the hiding place of God, if you will, and yet Apostle Paul reminds us very clearly that we are the temple. My hope is when you come here, you can feel safe, you can feel sheltered. Maybe some of you even need to feel covered. And yet some of you need to be lifted up. Some of you need to see a different perspective. And that's what happens when God is present. And how is God present? In every single one of you. That's what I hope you will cherish and really expect to encounter when you come here together. And especially when we come to pray, and that's what we're going to do right now. So let's think about that for a minute.